Hello, I'm Dr. Opeyemi Ogunyomi. Welcome to the Long Arc Conversation. Every extraordinary life has a backstory. Behind every great leader, creator, influencer, people with long lasting impact, is what I call long arc of growth, learning, resilience, failure, and transformation. In these conversations, we go beyond mere success story to uncover the experiences, the ideas that shape leaders, organizations, and societies. Because lasting impact is rarely built in a moment. So I need you to do me a favor. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, like this video, and share it with your community, with your friends, and everyone that you know. Because you'll find these conversations really helpful. See you. At some point in adulthood, many people have a strange experience. You're having an argument with somebody and suddenly you hear your father's voice coming out of your mouth, and you say something and think, I've become my mother. I've heard that several times from close friends. Or you find yourself doing something in a relationship and wonder, why do I always respond like this? Why do I shut down when there's conflict? Why do I panic when somebody pulls away? Why is it so difficult for me to ask for help? Why do I need everybody to approve of me? Why am I uncomfortable with affection? Why? Why do I feel guilty when I rest? Why do I become anxious when I make a mistake? And as you begin, tracing some of these patterns, eventually you arrive somewhere very familiar. You arrive home. Sometimes you arrive at your childhood, sometimes your parents. And the beautiful thing is, psychology has given us more language than previous generations had for talking about these things. So we have attachments, we have childhood trauma, we have parenting styles, we have emotional neglect, we have adverse childhood experiences, we have family systems, we have intergenerational patterns. And I think the language has helped many people understand experiences that they could never previously explain. But it has also created a difficult question. How much of who I am today is my parents' responsibility? And perhaps more importantly, at what point does my life become that does it become my responsibility? Right. So let's establish something clearly. Your childhood is important. The environment you grow matters. All right. How caregivers, your parents, how they respond to you matters too. So whether home feels predictable also matters. Whether you feel safe also matters. Whether affection is available to you is important. We need to look at that. How conflict is handled, all right, is important. What behavior gets rewarded is important. What behavior gets punished is important. Um, Children are learning way ahead of time before they can explain, what they're learning. A child is discovering, can I trust people? What happens when I make a mistake? Is love something I have to earn? Can I express anger? A child is learning, what happens when I cry? Are adults safe? Is the world predictable? Do my needs matter? What does marriage look like? Be shocked. How do men behave? How do women behave? What happens when somebody hurts me? Do we talk about problems or do we pretend nothing happened? Do you see these patterns? Those lessons, they enter through ordinary life. And because a child has very limited experience, then the home becomes the original reference point. The child doesn't work into another family and say, interesting, interesting, clap for them. Their conflict resolution strategy appears more adaptive than ours. No, 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 no. It does not happen that way. Home is simply home. Normal is whatever you repeatedly experience. That's what normalcy is. Until you grow old enough to discover, wait. Everybody's family doesn't do this. Then you see, okay, it's not normal. Something else is quite important in this conversation. You see, many behaviors that become problems in adulthood may have made sense in the environment where they developed. And suppose you grew up in a home where expressing disagreement, brought punishment. Then what you do is you learn to keep quiet. That may have protected you as a child. Now you're 34 and you're married. And every time there's conflict, you shut down. Your spouse says to you, talk to me, baby, talk to me, honey, talk to me, sweetheart. But something in you has learned that conflict is dangerous. Silence will keep me safe. Or perhaps affection in your home was inconsistent. Sometimes it is warm, sometimes withdrawn. You learn to monitor people closely, right? Are they still happy with me? Are they still happy with me? Did I do something wrong? Ah, do I did I do something wrong? Why hasn't this person replied my message? Why? Again, at some point, that behavior may have helped you make sense of an unpredictable environment. But a strategy can outlive the environment that created it. And suddenly, what protected the child begins to limit the adult you are right now. And that is why self awareness is very, very important. You don't want to joke with it. There can be tremendous relief in finally understanding where something came from. That light bulb moment. Oh, that's why I react that way. Oh, that's why this situation affects me so strongly. Oh, that's why I struggle to trust people. And I never want to take that away from anybody because some people experience genuinely harmful childhood. So some people experience abuse, neglect, violence, addiction, abandonment. In some cases, severe instability. And the consequences can follow people for years. So we should never just sit comfortably on a YouTube channel and tell people just get over it. Human beings don't work that way because pain leaves patterns and some wounds require serious work. They require safe relationships and sometimes professional help. But there's another part of the conversation we cannot afford to avoid, which is understanding where a pattern came from does not automatically change the pattern. To get that, at some point, you have to decide what you're going to do with what you understand now. You have to decide. There is a subtle danger that can happen when we discover psychological language. The explanation becomes the identity. Things like, I am like this because my parents are like this, or my parents are like that. I can't trust because my father is like this. I sabotage relationships because my mother is like this. It's a generational pattern. I avoid conflict because growing up, this is what we do. All of that may contain some truths. All of that may actually be true. But be careful because an explanation is supposed to give you more agency. If your new understanding leaves you believing that you have less capacity to change than you had before, then something has gone wrong. Let me tell you this, psychology should help you see the pattern clearly enough to work with it. Psychology should not become a permanent permission to sleep. At 14, you may have had very little control over your environment, but at 34, you have choices that the 14-year-old version of you did not have. You can choose relationships, you can learn, you can set boundaries. You can, seek help. You can even apologize in some cases. You can leave harmful environments now. You can build new habits. You can practice saying what you previously swallowed. You can learn courage. You can learn to receive love. You can learn to give love differently than what you experienced when you were a teenager. You can create in your own home what you wish had existed in the home where you grew up. And that, to me, is one of the most hopeful things about adulthood. Although adulthood can be stressful, I know, but some bits of hope. Then there is another realization that many of us eventually have, which is your parents are human beings. Your parents are human beings. When you're six, your father is just daddy, your mother is just mommy. They feel like finished products, the next best thing after jollof rice. Then you become the age they were when they add you, and suddenly you think, wait. My father had three children at this age, at this age, and you begin to see them differently. You realize your mother had fears too. You realize that your father had insecurities. They had financial pressure. They had childhoods too. They inherited things. They inherited stuff. They repeated some things. They made some mistakes. They corrected some things. They got some things right. They got some things terribly. They got some things not just terribly, they got some things terribly wrong. And understanding that can produce compassion. But compassion does not require pretending harmful things were harmless. So you can say, my parents did the best they knew how to do. And sometimes you may also have to say, what they knew how to do was not enough for what I needed. And those two statements can sit together because maturity gives us room for complexity. Yeah, it gives us room for complexity. You can honor your parents and still tell the truth. And this is especially important in cultures like mine. We are very big on honoring parents. And I believe in honor. I honor my parents. I honor people who are older than me. But sometimes we confuse honor with silence, as though acknowledging something unhealthy that happened in your family, automatically means you hate your parents. No, no. You can love your mother and acknowledge what hurt you. You can honor your father and recognize a pattern you refuse to carry forward. You see, you can be grateful for sacrifice and still admit there were needs that were not met. You don't you don't have to turn your parents into villains in order to understand your own pain. And you do not have to turn them into saints in order to honor them. They were people, human beings, and people are complicated. Let that settle into your mind. People are complicated. I want you to know that forgiveness and access are different questions, which is another thing we need to look at. Because if somebody harmed you, forgiveness, forgiveness and access are different decisions that you need to make. Forgiving somebody does not always mean you remove every boundary, because reconciliation requires more than one person's willingness. The word trust is built through behavior. Some people have parents with whom a healthier relationship can be rebuilt. That's wonderful. Wonderful. But for some people, the wisest relationship includes significant boundaries. So these are deeply personal situations, okay? Different folks, different strokes. And this is why internet advice should never flatten everybody's family into one formula. No. But whatever your family situation is, the central question, or what I'll call the umbrella question, remains: what patterns stop with you? Think about that. Someone has to interrupt the pattern. Maybe anger has traveled through your family for generations. Grandfather shouted at father, father shouted at you, and now you have children. Somebody has to say, it stops here. Ah, no, 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 no. It ends here. Maybe nobody apologized in your home. You will learn to apologize. Maybe affection was awkward. You will learn to hug your children. Maybe nobody talked about emotions. My people, you will learn emotional language. Maybe your case is that everybody avoided difficult conversations. You will learn to sit in discomfort and talk about it. Maybe money was chaotic. You will learn financial discipline. And maybe, just maybe, marriage was full of content. You will learn another way to disagree. And that's how cycles change. It has to end with someone. It does not change through one dramatic announcement. No, it changes through repeated behavior, a different response, then another one, then another one, until what was normal in the old house is no longer normal in the new one. But you've got to be patient with yourself. And don't imagine that because you have identified a pattern today, it disappears tomorrow. No. Sometimes you will respond exactly the way you promised yourself you wouldn't. You will hear yourself saying the same thing your parents used to say. So don't collapse into shame, please. Just notice it. When you notice it, the next thing you do, you repair. Then you try again. Because growth often looks less dramatic than we imagine. The gap between trigger and reaction gets slightly longer. You become quicker to apologize, right? Then you catch yourself, yeah, earlier. Then you communicate instead of withdrawing for 3 days. I'm describing a situation now. You ask for reassurance instead of creating a fight. You notice that you are activated and you say, "Oh, please, can we pause this conversation?" I want to come back when I actually can hear you. Right now, I'm angry. I cannot hear you. Let's come back to the conversation. That's growth. Over time, new patterns now become possible when you do that. And please, please, and please, don't use your childhood to avoid apologizing. And this one is very, very important. Imagine hurting somebody. They tell you what you did really affected me, and you respond, well, you have to understand, my father was emotionally unavailable to me too. Okay, okay, we get it. So now apologize. Apologize, man. Your story deserves compassion. The person you hurt also deserves accountability. So we can actually understand your behavior and still expect you to take responsibility for it. And that's adulthood. And like I've been saying, sometimes two things are true. You were wounded, and now you're wounding people. Your wound explains something, it doesn't erase the impact. Mm-mm. So, healing also means becoming safe for other people. It's very important we know this. So, your children should not have to heal from everything you refuse to face. And this is for those of us raising children. It gets more serious. Your unresolved patterns do not remain private. Get that. They enter relationships, they enter marriages, they enter parenting. Hmm. The anger you never dealt with meets your child's mistake. The abandonment you never dealt with meets your spouse independence. You see, that insecurity that you did not deal with will meet somebody else's success. That's why some spouse cannot stand the success of their spouse. The perfectionism you never question becomes pressure on your children. And this is why doing your own work is an act of love. Not because you will become a perfect parent. No, there is no perfect parent anywhere. Your children will probably have complaints about you too. Yeah, they will complain about you. But perhaps they can inherit fewer wounds and more tools from you. Perhaps they can say, my parents apologized. They can say, oh, my parents listened to me. They can say, my parents learned. They can say, my parents changed. You see, all those things I mentioned are very important. So, next question is, are your parents responsible? I need us to come back to that question. Are your parents responsible for who you became? They are certainly part of the story. For some people, an enormous part at that. They gave you genes, they gave you an environment, they gave you examples, they gave you relationships, they gave you language, they gave you opportunities, they gave you limitations, they gave you patterns, they gave you beliefs. Some gave safety, some gave instability. Actually, most people probably gave a mixture of strengths and weaknesses. So your childhood shaped you, but as adulthood progresses, another person increasingly enters the story. And guess who that person is? You. You begin choosing what stays, you begin choosing what gets to be questioned, you choose what needs healing, you choose what needs forgiving, you choose what requires a boundary, you choose what you want to carry forward, what you want to move to the next day, you choose what to leave behind, and eventually your life becomes the answer you give to what happened to you. It becomes a narrative. So maybe your parents did not give you everything you needed. Grieve that. Maybe they gave you far more than you understood. I need you to appreciate that. Maybe they hurt you too. I need you to tell yourself the truth. And maybe they have changed. You need to allow room for that if it is safe, right? Maybe they have not even changed. You know that you need to build boundaries that you need. But don't spend the rest of your life waiting for your childhood to become different because it won't. You cannot go back and raise the child you were, but you can care for the adults that child became. You can learn, you can heal, you can build healthier relationships. You can choose differently. You can ask for help. You can interrupt patterns that existed before you were born. And perhaps one of the most powerful things that you can eventually say to yourself is, this actually came through my family, but it will not continue through me. It ends with me. What I just said, that is growth. That is responsibility. And that's part of building a life across the long arc. I'll see you on the next episode of the Long Arc Conversations with Dr. Opeyemi, because we're building people and shaping futures.